Hello and welcome to the Abel Contemporary Gallery. I'm Teresa Abel and I'm pleased to be here today with Joanne Kirkland. Joanne is one of our featured artists in a show called The Nature of Things. Meg Yaschak could not be here today, but this show is wonderful and we hope that you will come and see it. But I'm excited to be here with Joanne, who is a Madison artist. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
I'm going to say a little bit about you first.
Okay.
Joanne has worked in ceramics since 1980, making pots in a barn in northern Illinois after graduating from Eastern Illinois University. As of 1984, Madison, Wisconsin has been her home, where she lives and works as a studio potter. Travels and studies in southwestern United States, Mexico, Japan, and most recently Germany have been major influences in her work. She uses a wax resist glazing technique where wax is painted on a first layer of glaze in a design and then resists the next color. Most of her pots are made on the wheel with porcelain clay, sometimes altering by paddling, stretching, or adding slabs. She likes the dynamic surface decoration with figurative and abstract imagery inspired by the elements and the environment of her daily life. Joanne's current work was inspired by a trip to Death Valley, doing some winter hiking. She was inspired to draw sketches on her forms for her husband based on his explanations of the night sky observations in the extremely dark areas of the valley, looking at the universe not so much from the point of view as a student of astronomy, but as an artist. These works are meditations of perception of the night sky. All right. So the first thing I thought, before we jump in and talk about the newest body of work, thinking about talking with you, I realized that I think right now you are an artist that we currently represent who has been with the gallery the longest. And I think about that. There's a lot of different reasons why artists might wax or wane. Some of it's just people get older and they stop making work, or they're not as active in their studio practice. But your sales have also stayed really relevant, and people get more and more excited about your work, and people who purchased your work 20 years ago still want to come in and buy every piece. And I think part of it is because you as an artist, the quality has always been extremely consistent, but you're always exploring, and your work has always evolved. And so there's also a thing that happens where sometimes people hit on a thing, and that's the thing they keep doing, and that's great. But a piece of yours, although you might see something in it that is obviously related to something you did 10 years ago or 20 years ago even, it's new. So if I've been collecting your work, I want the new thing because it's just that exciting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you put it really well.
Good.
Yeah, I've been making pots my whole adult life, and I added to that teaching. I taught at MATC for about 15 years, and before that, long before that, I taught a little bit here and there. But there's just nothing else that I'd rather be doing, making pots. And so when I retired from teaching, I still work in my studio. I don't spend as many hours working in my studio, but it's always going to be part of my life.
Yeah. Well, for this body of work, I know you had some setbacks in your personal life, and so we had, we plan a lot of these shows with artists. We'll plan, 6 months to almost always a year in advance.
Yeah.
So, but I remember talking to you and you saying, "Oh, stuff, and I can't," and some injury and things, and you were worried about having enough work done. But then you had just this explosion of fabulous pieces when you showed up for the show, and I thought, and you were still sort of like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to get more work done," and I thought,
Well, I had about half of the work I had at least made on the wheel.
Yeah.
Before I broke my wrist, and but then I was painting a lot of them, of a black underglaze on pieces. when I was having some work done on my eyes, and so I was blurry, blurry with one eye, and trying to get detailed stuff. That was interesting.
Yeah.
I put my brush down and it wouldn't be at the place that I thought it was, but I could scrape it off.
That's so crazy.
So yeah, I long ago I sold my work. We were talking earlier about when I started having my work at when it was called Artisan Gallery.
Yeah.
And because for about 8 or 9 years I was selling most of my work wholesale through the ACE shows. People would come
American
from all
Craft
over.
Council.
People would come from all over the country to. I was up in Minnesota, and they'd order stuff for. I'd have my schedule for the whole year set up, which was nice when my husband was in nursing school, and we already had one kid, and so so I'd come home and I'd have a year's worth of work to make.
Oh, so
And
you were
I shipped it
wholesaling to galleries. You weren't selling retail to customers.
No, well, they'd have at those shows they would have one day of only wholesale buyers, and then the next day was to retail. Yeah, it was a good way to know that I was, had work to do and that I could sell it without spending a lot of time going to individual shows.
No, that makes sense. It can be really scary as an artist to plan ahead, and if you don't know what your annual income is going to be, it's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, so that it felt better, but but after about 8 or 9 years of doing that, because I only did the show 2 or 3 years, and then the galleries just kept reordering from me.
Yeah.
So I was shipping stuff to Boston and Washington D.C. and California and New York, and then I just got burnt out of making the same things all the time. And so then I took a break and made some totally different things for a while. And then I had another kid, and I was because the stuff that I was doing, I was glazing with, making mostly functional things, but I made a lot of non-functional pots that were using leaves. Because I don't think I was doing that when I started bringing my work to Artisan. Yeah, but so that was the stuff.
You should have had a slideshow of this.
Yeah. That I used to have it on my website, but I lost my website last year, so but I still have the pictures. Anyhow, I just I need to take a break, and I did. That was when I did some traveling to. I was in Japan and I was in Mexico. Well, I was in Mexico first, and I spent some time. A few years in a row, we spent time in the Southwest because I love the Pueblo pottery down there. So a lot of the way I did designs kind of came from that, and so I just decided that after a while, I kind of knew where I wanted to go with doing things with wax resist and to make designs on pots, and drawings all over pots, and then what I was going to say is when I had my second kid, I just didn't have the time to spend. So then I had a few years where I was doing really simple things with glazes. Yeah. And so my work has changed and evolved a lot because of what my needs are in my life.
Yeah. So let's go even further back. So, well, one thing, because you've been a professional artist basically your whole adult life.
My whole adult life, I'm either making pots and or teaching it.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, but there will be people who are going to watch this recording or aren't that familiar with you. When did you start making? When was it ceramics? Like when was it art, and then when was it ceramics for you as a young person?
Well, I always made things. Like my mom kind of saw that in me when I was really little, and she remembered setting up in her ironing room, in the laundry, which was in the basement. Okay. She remembered setting up one of those. They used to have those like little kid tables where you were in a seat and you're sort of surrounded by table.
Yeah.
And we had one of those. And she would just give me construction paper and paste, and she said I would like make things, and they'd be like kind of moving onto the floor, you know, they get so big. And we did things with paint and, you know, just playing with art. And every year my favorite Christmas present was a box of art supplies.
Yeah.
So I was always doing painting and drawing, and then I had those sets that you paint by number.
Yeah.
And it smells like they look like stained glass.
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't allow kids to use it anymore. But there I'd be at my little table. Well, I'd grown out of that table, but then I had a card table under the stairway. And I still work in the basement.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, I just always did that. And when I was in high school, I had seen a picture of a potter, a video of a potter on public TV. This is near Chicago. And I was like, I want to do that. He was making a pot on the wheel.
Wow.
And but my high school was so overcrowded in the 70s. High schools were really crowded. And so we had to go on to separate shifts.
Okay.
And it was impossible to get into the pottery class. You had to take other art classes to get into it first. And I sort of blew that. And so, but I had a friend show me how to throw pots. She was in the class, and we skipped out of gym class one day, and she showed me how to throw pots. And
how reckless of you.
I couldn't.
Skipping class to go to a different classroom.
Pretty wild, huh? And that got me really hooked in.
Yeah.
And I think maybe sometimes, if it had been easy for me to get into a class, would I have loved it as much as I did? Or was putting it off until my first year in college, when I was finally able to get into a pottery class my second semester. I wasn't going to major in art, but I took this pottery class, and that was
So
it.
do you think you romanticized it all that time?
I don't know, maybe just making me hold off with,
Yeah.
I didn't have instant gratification,
Right.
you know, so then when I finally did it, it didn't come easy.
Yeah.
And I put so much into it. All my other classes suffered. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
So, and then when did you start teaching? Well, I mean, if you taught on and off in different.
Yeah, my last semester, well, I took a break one semester and went out to California to work in, ended up working in 2 potteries there.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't like an official internship or anything, but it was like.
Was it production?
A grad student that I knew who was at my school left his place in Sacramento, and me and another friend of his went out there, and I helped him out in pottery. And so I did that for the semester. And during that time, I realized that I needed to learn a hell of a lot more before I could have my own pottery. All I wanted to do was have a pottery business of my own. And I realized after only, 2 years doing pottery that I needed to learn a lot more, especially about firing and glazes and stuff like that. So I went back to my school, and I talked to both of the teachers that were there at the time, who were great. It was a really great program at Eastern Illinois University. And I said, I want to do this, this, and this. Can I, make sure I get this done with you guys?
Yeah.
And they both helped me through that.
That's
and then I decided, maybe I might like to teach someday. So my last year at school, I took all the required classes for teaching. So my degree was in art, but I also got a teaching certificate. And so when I got out of school, I tried to think, and I had to get the certificate, I had to do a semester of student teaching, which was really fun.
Yeah. So did you like teaching right away? I mean, did it seem like I need to make some money sometime, so I'm going to teach, or did it feel like
I loved the teacher I worked with. It's like I kind of learned, in my opinion, what not to do.
Okay.
And the kind of kids that I liked working with were like the really creative kids who I had been warned were going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
So we won't talk too much more about that, but that's what I really enjoyed. And when I got out of school and I needed to have a job of some kind, and I didn't have money to start a studio, so I ended up teaching for, I think it was about 4 years, at an alternative high school. at that time, in the very late 70s, there were, it was a big thing in Chicago, and there was a whole network of alternative high schools and grade schools and stuff. And the one that I found, I went and visited a bunch of them and took notes, and I found the one that needed an art teacher, that wanted an art teacher, was very close to where I was living.
Yeah.
So I taught there, and I taught a lot more than art there. So it was really, I don't know, I loved working with the kids there. I ended up teaching backpacking too. With one of the parents was the backpacking. We go on these 10-day trips to the Smoky Mountains. And yeah, that was a big part of it.
That's great. So let's talk about this new body of work and the sky.
Okay.
So some of the pieces that we're looking at, well, we can talk about anything in the show we want to, because not everything in the show is influenced by your trips with your beautiful husband looking at the sky.
That can happen in our front yard. Or like last night, driving home, Venus was above the moon, was like a little skinny fingernail with the round part pointed down to the horizon, and Venus straight above it, looking like it was going to drop into the dish. Yeah, that was really cool.
That's very
Yeah.
well, should we grab a couple of the plates
Yeah.
and just grab a few that, and then we'll sit back down and we can hold them up and I'm gonna grab a couple I want you to talk about.
Okay.
Oh, I think we need to talk about this one. Okay. We're back. So which one should we start with? Which one did you make first of these?
Well, let me see. This is one of the first. Well, actually, these two.
And you gotta see, like, if you go walk through the show, like, because they're on the back and they're just.
The underside is like a cute little decorative dish. Like something made in, I don't know where, some imaginary country.
Kirkland country.
But this is one that I was trying to capture, like the moonbeams that you see when the moon is out, and then there's also like a star or a planet that's coming in between. But that's not really, it's not a real thing. I was trying to get the feel of moonbeams, and when I was done, I was like, oh man, that almost reminds me of a sand dollar or something. But I decided to stop trying to make it look like moonbeams and just go with what I had. And
Hey,
so
that's
sort of
a brilliant
meditation.
thing to realize, actually, because I think a lot of times, as an artist, it's important to realize you have an idea of what you want to do in your head, and sometimes you have to just remind yourself that what you're really doing is making a good piece of art, and it doesn't matter if it veers off from what representation is or what you thought you were supposed to be making, right?
Yeah. And then actually the ones that's here, this is, I don't have the ones, because Kevin has the ones that I made for him. So this all started because I was trying to work out in my head what it is that I love looking at the night sky and understanding that he understands the physics of what's going on, and I just can't, for some reason I just can't get it in my head. And the thing that I love so much about looking at the night sky has more to do with seeing how the planets and the Earth interact with each other. As I see it, as an Earthling, I'm seeing it from the Earth. I don't ever want to go into outer space. I'm never leaving the Earth, you know?
Yeah.
But I like seeing what's going on in the sky and knowing how vast it is. And so, like, something like this is what I make with just the moon and like, I never really understood before how, like, the planets can be aligned, and they look like stars in the sky. So I've got Saturn here, and that's probably Mars, Jupiter. So they're aligned, and this was at one night, this is what I saw over Lake Winona. So there's the lake. So I made that just as like a little meditation, and then I just kept making more. Yeah, the Death Valley scene. We're going to Death Valley again
Oh,
in about a month.
Oh, great.
And haven't been there in a while. But yeah, we were out, this is about 7 years ago, and I guess I started doing these a long time ago. See, I'm hanging around my house. And then I did newer ones like that. But we were out there and we were getting ready to leave. The sky was pitch black, and all of a sudden this, what looked like a diamond necklace came coming down across the sky. And we were like, what is that? We're like, aliens? What is that? And then we got to the place where we parked our car, and some people who were there, and they said, I think that's the, I don't know, is it Starlink or Skylink or something?
Yeah.
Had just, the first one had been launched.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't do it making it launch, so I just did it like as if the necklace was
Yeah.
going like that on here.
So then what is this?
That one is, this is like when sometimes, so actually, this could be Venus here. I mean, this is like what it was last night, with the moon crescent going like that, and then Venus was up here. I'm not sure if I can remember which planet this one is, but there was a bigger star that way and one that way, and I think it was actually kind of more like this. So I was just trying to bring out the connection between the two planets, that, and imagining how they're circling behind the crescent moon.
I love it. Well, you know what I love about all of these is, and I think it actually has to do partly that you don't totally understand the science, and they just become these great, they feel like they could have been made 500 years ago, somebody's visualization of the sky, or 1,000 years ago, or today, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I study a lot of medieval art, and I've been studying these kind of night skies of medieval paintings and things, and I just love that it's this, you know, it's an homage in a way, it's your love of the sky, but it's just this, you know, an artist's rendition of what's happening without it having to get all muddled up with what actually is happening. Anyway, they're timeless, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
And this one is different. What's the word? The different planets that were aligned in a couple of different
Orbits? No.
yeah, orbits. But when they're together, I'm kind of imagining this elliptical.
Elliptic.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like they're, I don't know, I just really like having that. It's almost like being in the middle of a big dance circle or something.
Yeah.
The planets dancing around. And then I like to, I don't want to glaze these because I like the texture of the porcelain fired in different ways. So it's like, I said something in my statement about it being like bone.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do this on bone too, just with like ink, and I'd be happy with the texture.
So talk about that. So these are wheel thrown,
Mm-hmm.
and then what? It's white porcelain.
So yeah, it's white porcelain, and after I fire them once,
Mm-hmm.
then I do the stipple drawing on it.
Okay.
I do these little dots
With black glaze.
with black underglaze.
Underglaze. Right
So-
on the porcelain.
Dot, dot, dot,
Yeah.
dot. And I have kind of an idea of where I want the stars and planets to be. And, but it kind of goes along, it's very meditative, like I'm working on it
So do you do
Pencil.
preliminary sketches
No.
at all, or do you just go to this
I
particular
sketch on
plate and
the
you just
clay.
figure it out?
Yeah, because I can sketch it on the clay and
Yeah.
with a pencil, and
Okay.
that doesn't show.
So you do sketch on the clay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the different kinds of firing, like, so that one looks like it was in a wood firing. With the wood firing, the ash that gets on the plate will give it a little bit of a toastiness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, like on here you can see that.
sort of
which I
seals
love.
the underglaze. And you get different, depending on where it is in the kiln, you get different amounts of that. So like this one has a little bit of a blush, it's called. And this, on the underside, you get a lot of the blush. That's from a wood firing. I say I want to have, I fire with a group of people at a big wood kiln. And Joe, who was asking, how much ash do you want? Because I don't want, some people fire in a wood kiln, they want gobs and gobs of ash so that you've got glaze almost.
Okay.
And I said, I just want it ash kissed. So this is ash kissed. Some of them are soda fired. This might be a soda fired.
And tell people who don't know what is soda firing.
Soda firing is it could be in any type of kiln, and at the end of the fire, when you get to a certain temperature, you put in ash water, like you blow it in with a spray, like a weed sprayer, or
What is ash water?
ash water. Soda water. I meant to
Soda
say.
water, okay.
Soda water, I meant to say.
Yes.
But I'm thinking about trying ash water to see if I can get something else. So
Okay, wait, so soda water.
soda
Tell
glaze.
people what soda water, is it soda water, just like you
It's-
think soda water is?
You can, not like drinking soda, like baking soda
Mhm.
or soda ash.
Okay,
And soda ash is an ingredient that you can get at ceramic materials places.
yeah, okay.
And it melts in with the water, and you don't want to stick your hands in it because it's alkaline.
Yes.
And so, but if you fire in a salt kiln, which I do too, you drop like the cut of salt you put in your water softener, you drop that in at the end of the firing, and all the salt just immediately ignites and circulates through the kiln. Very poisonous, you don't want to breathe that stuff. And so soda.
The result is great.
Yes, the result is great. It's a very old technique of, in Europe, that's how they made a lot of those, like think of the crocks from Germany and stuff. There in England, they were fired, you don't put any glaze on it, you can put colors on it, but it gets glazed with salt. And the soda looks very similar. It's called an orange peel effect, but I don't want a whole lot of it on it because I don't want to blur the drawings.
Right,
So
yes,
just a little kissed.
yes, yeah. Okay, there's other pieces too in the show, so like, tell people, what is this technique?
This is one that I could do this with the black and white. Like this one here is black glaze on top of clear glaze.
Okay,
And this one is black underglaze. So I put that on after the pot is first fired, and then I do the black, and then I dip it in clear glaze.
Okay.
And this one is everywhere that you see. These three were done that way.
with the underglaze and
The underglaze.
And if you get up close, you can see there's a subtle difference, because like I can see all the brush strokes kind of from the
Mhm.
underglaze more.
Yeah.
And then on that one, I don't see any brush strokes.
That's because there was no brush. Oh, the only brush I used there was to paint the wax.
Oh, because that's wax.
Yeah. So I paint wax on the clear glaze. So I can draw my drawing, lay out the grid or whatever, and then paint liquid wax on it. And then I dip it, let it dry, and then I dip it in the black glaze. And the black glaze just magically rolls off the clear glaze. Not quite.
Yeah.
You have to kind of clean it up with a sponge. And then it just gets fired in the high fire that's in my gas stove. yeah, I do soda firing, wood firing, gas reduction firing. I think it's just 3 kinds.
But still, that's, you know. Are there any other pieces in the show you want to talk about?
Well, I just want to say that these pieces and some of the other ones where you obviously see like a grid that I laid out, they're inspired by quilts that I've grown up with. And I mean, long before I did pottery, my mom sewed most of her clothes. She made all kinds of things with the sewing machine. And my grandmother made quilts. And I noticed how, like when I was in the Southwest, or even in Japan, patterns that people put on pieces were, you know, very similar to quilt patterns. And so when I did, usually when I do patterns on pieces, they're really planned out beforehand. But this time around, I wanted to do some things where it was a little bit more like jazz or something, you know, where I improvised as I was going around. So I'd lay out a grid and then work on the pot as I went around without any plan and start kind of evolving the quilt pattern as I went
Is that
around.
are these that way?
Yeah.
Or you just kind of let it go?
Yes, you can kind of see, you see like obvious, like known quilt patterns, and then as you go around, it's like, it might be that for a couple of squares, but then I changed it, you know, kind of morphed it into another pattern.
Well, that's great, and then you literally can't make a mistake.
Right. Right. And then I started doing these things too where, like, well, I guess these have, this one here, where I started leaving, like, I would go around and then I'd leave like one place where I could do like one whole pattern from top to bottom. Yeah. And some of the ones with the pollinators on it.
Yeah, I love those.
Um,
I was actually going to grab one of those, and then I also want to talk about, well, I love this one too.
So these are ones with the wax resist. And I was, sometimes I'll spend a lot of time just laying out where each section of the grid is equal. And I thought, no, this time I'm gonna lay out the section, and then when I end up with one place that's skinnier, it's gonna be sort of like, it would be like a seam or something.
Yeah.
Or in sewing, or it would be like a, you know, like in other kinds of crafts, there's like sometimes like a break in the design. And so I decided to leave that there.
That's very cool.
It's
You
so
know, I
relaxing.
noticed that, but I thought it was very, very planned out.
I planned it out while I was making it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I decided that, you know, because some things that are like a grid and a pattern, I don't want it to be so like mechanical.
Yeah.
You know, I want them to have some like human error or something in it, you know, that shows this was made by a person on the spur of the moment.
And then do you also, but do you sort of start sketching with a pencil first?
On the pot, yeah. I put the glaze on, let it dry, and then I sketch with a pencil on top of the glaze.
And then do you use a brush to put the wax on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a really skinny brush so I can outline everything with that and then fill in with a slightly thicker one. And then let it dry overnight and then dip it in black.
And then cross your fingers? Or do you feel like at this point you've done this technique for so long, do you feel very confident that you know what your result's going to be?
Pretty dependable, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been playing around a little bit with firing the kiln. Like my kiln is not, I like it that it's not completely accurate from top to bottom. I don't use any like the kinds of meters and stuff that people have or, you know, measuring oxygen or anything. It's a pretty basic gas kiln, and there's like a certain part of my kiln that usually is hotter.
Yeah.
So I've been playing around a little bit with putting some things that have these designs in there to let it get droopy.
So lately, so this whole body of work and some of the work that you've been doing recently is black and white.
I do Right.
It's been a lot, but lately it's been black and white. Is it just because you're very, very interested in the pattern and it's the best way to sort of explore that? Is that...
Yeah, I think so, because I also have a green glaze and blue glaze, and I've been wanting to develop some new glazes now that I'm not spending half my time teaching.
Right.
And all the glazes that I work with at the school are for electric kilns.
Yeah.
And so I want to develop some that I can use in my kiln at home.
Yeah.
And it's very slow, because I do maybe 4 firings a year. And it's very slow if you don't have a lot of firings to put tests into.
Yeah, 4 a year, that's interesting. Do you feel like when you were teaching, just in general over your entire career, do you feel like that informed your studio practice, or did you feel like they were very separate creative things?
I did a lot of, like I would make things, that kinds of things, like for my demos and stuff.
Yeah.
I would do like things that I was doing at home, in my studio, at school. But I also did some things that were inspired by, I'd be doing like a demo or something for my students. Like the pieces that I did about 10 years ago, their trompe-l'oeil firewood pieces.
Right. Yes.
That was
Those were great.
real different from my usual
They were
work.
raku, right?
Yes, they were raku fires. So when I was teaching, we did raku firings every semester. And I started demonstrating a way of building where you make a piece out of a solid lump of clay. And I started just whacking it with a paddle that I had, a wooden paddle. And so I didn't really know what I was going to make. I was just like, this is how, and it was going to be like a quick little one-off thing. You know, you can do something as wild as this. And then you cut it with a wire and you scoop out the insides of both halves.
Yeah.
And then you put it back together. And the thing that I made just happened to look like a hunk of wood.
Yeah.
And so I started making these pieces at home like that. And the first ones I made, they were like a box that you could open.
I remember.
But I went out to my fire pit out back and actually brought some partially burnt pieces into my studio.
As models.
As models, yeah. So I did a whole series of that work.
Because you had a show at the gallery that was...
That was when I had a show there.
It was something about your backyard, right?
My backyard or my Midwestern home or
something
like that, yeah.
Because it was also, you did those big bucket shapes.
Yeah, that
had narrative scenes of like there was a goat in your backyard.
Yeah, we don't have
bunnies
goats anymore.
I know, but there was
bunnies and the things that actually I see in my backyard were all on these
sort of these
big
great
buckets.
narratives all wrapped all around these bucket shapes.
Black and white.
Yes.
And but I also had these wood pieces.
Yeah.
A deconstructed campfire.
It was great.
Yeah.
Do you have
I
do you have pieces that you kept that you own representative of sort of all the different bodies of literature?
Yeah.
We might have to have a retrospective.
Someday, yeah. We were just talking about that the other day about where are we gonna put all this stuff? So yeah, there's certain things I want to save for something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not done yet though.
No. A retrospective doesn't have to mean you're done. It's a mid-career retrospective, really. I'm sure you call it, yeah. So do you feel like you have the night sky? Have you explored it? Are you going to be off into something else? Or are you going to keep exploring the night sky? Not that you ever completely have to do something to rest, but move on.
I don't know. I feel a little bit finished with it, but I'll probably still do some.
Yeah.
And let's see. I know the next group of pieces that I want to make, because I've been doing all of these decorative pieces, is I want to make some like really practical, useful pieces.
Yeah.
Like
This is very useful.
it is for flowers or something. Yeah. Decoration is very useful.
Adding beauty to the world right now, I think, are the most useful things we can do.
Yeah. But I've had it on my list of things to make for like a couple years now. I had made some baking dishes,
Yeah.
and then I sold them all. And I've had a couple of messages from people. Are you going to make any more baking dishes? So it's been on my list of things to make for the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
I'm going to make some more baking dishes and like plates and mugs. And I mean, I always make mugs. So all that stuff. And then I mean, I wanted to do a series of pieces that are inspired by the rocks that I love hiking around
Okay.
in Arizona, and we're going back to Death Valley next month, and it's just such incredible geology, which is another thing I don't know very much about, but I like it just for like its aesthetic, different kinds of rocks and stones, but that takes a lot of testing.
So after this, I'm going to ask you this question, and maybe we'll open it up to questions. So now that you've studied the night sky in your aesthetic way, do you feel like you learned anything about yourself or the sky, or do you look at the sky differently now that you've had this like dedicated meditation on it for this chunk of time? Does it change the way you walk out into the night world and look at the sky?
I think it does, yeah. I think I let go of that need to understand. You know, I'm not a physicist, but just to understand and enjoy the
You don't have to know
the
exactly why
awesomeness.
it's happening.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Somebody, I don't know if I said, someone sent me, I had posted a picture of one of them in the, on Instagram, and someone wrote me a message saying, you know, have you been looking at pictures from medieval or, you know, ancient drawings of the sky? And I never thought of looking for that.
Yeah.
So I said, no, I never have done that. And so I just Googled it,
Yeah.
and this picture showed up of Galileo's Saturn.
Yeah.
So I did one that was inspired by that drawing, because yeah, it does look a little bit like what I've been doing, my kind of naive drawings of the night sky. Weren't so different from, you know, was Galileo in the 1500s?
Anyone? I don't know.
Someone will know.
Yes.
I like communicating, that way of communicating with people from the past.
Yeah.
And maybe the future.
Well, no, and that's the thing, because I think as artists too, there's a thing, I think we like to think of ourselves as a lineage.
Yeah.
We're building on the artists before us, and hopefully, people will, and hopefully, 300 years from now, someone will.
Yeah, these will last.
Yeah.
Even if they're broken.
And they'll love it, and they'll think about it, wonder who made this, and what are they thinking.
Yeah.
Questions, anybody? Yes.
Can you speak to how you record the inspiration you get while traveling to then imprint that on your work later?
Oh,
Good question.
very good.
If you record it, or is it a mental note?
Yeah, it was always mental, but I'm very bad at like journaling, or, I'll start a new journal and it lasts for about 3 days. And then I pick it up again 2 years later. And so, but I do that with sketches too. I have a bunch of little spiral notebooks around the house that I've like drawn out ideas on. And, but I guess in the last like since we went to, I keep a record on my phone of photos. I have like an album set aside on my phone that is called Glaze Dreams. And things that I see, they might not be pottery. They might be like floor tiles, or a rock, natural rock, that I take pictures of. And those are all, and things like animals or birds that I take pictures of. So I do a lot of crows and loons and things like that too. I haven't been doing those much lately, except for the crows. But so pictures that I take myself are kept in that album. So I used to have like all kinds of books and they take up a lot more space than pictures of myself.
Joanne, you guys kind of touched on this before, but maybe talk a bit more about it. How did you fight the urge to not become, I don't know if the term would be a one-trick pony with your work, or a gallery that your customer base fell in love with the blue glaze that you had? How did you, and also the other side of that too is, I guess, you know, you've had the ability to work against that too with, like, you know, your teaching income and your partner's income too, with not getting kind of boxed into a corner. Because I think a lot of times when people think of a professional artist, you think of someone with a beret on just slapping stuff on a wall and at home, and they just have this endless amount of time to make these art projects, and then the gallery gets it and they're selling it for $30 million a piece. It's so romanticized. But how did you fight that urge to get boxed into a corner with your work and continue to push through and make new stuff and challenge yourself as an individual?
Well, a long time ago when I was selling my work nationally with like wholesale to galleries, that was nice to have an income that I could count on. And then I also went through periods where I did many, many art shows, like all summer long. And then I ended up with 3 kids eventually. And I decided that I needed to have a studio at home. That was the only way I was going to be able to, that's all I wanted to do was make pots or teach about it. So I taught a little bit here and a little bit there. And I did take a big break somewhere in the middle of that when I was just feeling too burnt out on making the same thing over and over again. And it was in that period that I was like, okay, I'm just going to slowly work back together, work it, you know, and see what comes out. And so that's when I started working with my, you know, kind of what inspired me. And it was actually something that a potter that I met in, she's a Hopi potter. And I kind of asked her a question like that because she was saying that, you know, people would, I got to her house, had met her niece in Santa Fe, went to her house, trying to make this a short story. And we drove 6 hours so I could meet her. Her name was, she's died since, but Dexter Napeo, a Hopi potter. And some collectors had been sitting, you know, the car was there from Denver.
Okay.
And I heard her say to them, we were waiting, and I heard her say to them, I'm sorry I don't have anything right now, but, you know, she's like been working on the corn. And I was like, oh man, I want to do pottery like that. You know, other things in my life take precedence over pottery sometimes. And then I ended up spending the afternoon with her in her workshop. And she told me a lot more.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, I figured she makes stuff and then she waits until she has a dream, or she waits till she gets this inspiration of what she's going to put on that pot. And she just started figuring, I'll make what I want to make, and then I'll find who wants to buy it.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that.
It sounds simple too, but to get yourself as an artist into that frame of mind, it's kind of profound.
Yeah.
Because you think you're supposed to do, or it's really hard if you're selling a thing, you feel like I have to keep doing this. And maybe sometimes you kind of do, like you have to pay the bills. It's a great motivator to just keep producing that thing.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make light of the fact that you might have to keep producing a certain kind of thing to pay the bills, but.
But I couldn't, like, I had just burnt out so much, I couldn't even go into the studio for like 6 months. And so, but it, you know, I mean, I can get to, you know, I have to say that teaching does have, you know, even teaching half-time helps out. And then I had a husband who was working after he finished school. So between the two of us, we were able to get by. And it's not like I've ever made gobs and gobs of money from my pottery, but it's been enough.
Well, and I'm looking at your husband, Kevin, and he's a musician. And I kind of feel like too, sometimes sometimes creative couples can be competitive over free time, but it seems like the two of you champion each other as well as I know you, and I think they also understand when all of your free time you desire to go and be in your studio because you probably want to get in and work on your music or something. So having somebody who supports the fact that in your free time, that's all you want to do is make pots. It's pretty great because not everyone understands that.
Other questions?
Yes.
Nara?
Well, that was sort of my question in terms of what a week looks like, or a month, or a year, in terms of every practice. Are you in the studio every day? Are you throwing in the morning for a couple hours and then doing glaze? Like, how do you put the pieces together? Or maybe it's more because it's such a passion.
It varies.
Yeah.
It varies by the season and where I am in the cycle. So like I usually take off like this time of year to like repair equipment or do anything. Like I'm going to do a deep cleaning of my studio this week. And I have some problems with my pug mill I have to solve. So usually January and February are dealing with that, and then I start
The really romantic parts of the job.
yeah, right, yeah, and then, but the rest of the year, depending on, now that we're both retired, we travel more. So last year I did not have enough time in my studio because we spent a lot of time traveling. But then when I get home, I like work in the studio making pots. I'll throw pots for a while, like maybe 3 weeks. It takes me about 3 weeks to fill up my kiln, and then it takes me about 3 weeks to glaze what I'm going to put in my kiln. And so I kind of work one or the other. And well, like last year, I thought I had 6 months to get ready for the show. And then one thing happened after another, and I had to go with that. So, there were like a couple of weeks where I couldn't lift a bag of clay. And so, but when I got to it, that's all I did. There were some weeks where I didn't do anything except for work in the studio and go see when he had a show. So it varies.
It's a good question, though. I know a couple of painters that we represent who are so dedicated, and it's different because you don't have to load the kiln and then wait. Like there's a different sort of cycle to oil painting, but they tell me the way that they get their work done is it's the first thing they do every day. And I know 2 or 3 people who are like this. They get up in the morning, they grab their cup of coffee, and they work for 4 or 5 hours before they do anything else. And then the rest of their day is free. And they do that at least 5 or 6 days a week. But if you get up and you're in your studio by 8 a.m. and then 4 or 5 hours later, you kind of do have a day to do the laundry and cook a meal and go listen to music or but that sort of that consistency and treating it like it's a job and getting in there and doing it every day.
Yeah, I'll do that some of the time.
Yeah.
Joe, do you want to talk about your crow mugs at all?
My crow ones.
Yeah.
Why?
Because we want to hear about it.
Oh, you want to hear about my crow ones?
Sure.
Well,
I love it that you're making crows.
Well, I've always loved crows, and I love how intelligent they are. I love what they mean. And I started doing crows because, when I first started doing some animals and insects and things like that on my pots, I was using color, a lot of colored glazes. And but I did not have time to do that kind of glazing when I started teaching, because that would be 4 layers. That means like 4 days to glaze a piece because you have to let it dry in between. And so I choose a lot of the animals that I put in my work are black animals. They're either black or they're white because that works out really well with doing black and white designs. But I love crows and I love loons. And so those were the first 2 things that I was doing. And then there's, like in some of my pieces from my show, what was it, Artisan, my backyard animals and skunks, another black and white animal.
Yeah.
So, but I love doing them, and I wouldn't love doing them if I was just like stamping them on, it would start to feel too much like production work. And because some people have said to me, why don't you just make a template or something? And I know some people will like take a picture and then cut it out and it becomes like a template for that. I prefer just drawing directly on the pot. And each one, as I'm making them, I'll make each crow like if I'm doing them on a mug. And then they sit next to each other. So they have this kind of relationship from one crow to the next and how they relate to each other. So the people are usually going to buy one, so they're not going to have other friends to hang out with.
Sometimes people buy numerous crow mugs together. I also, when you put them up, it's like it's a murder of mugs.
Yeah.
But it's evident that they're all different. And people will really, if we have a grouping of them out, people will grab them and they'll sort of study like which is their favorite crow.
It's very expressive.
Some are raunchy and some are mad and some are picking away and they're kind of like real crows are.
It's great. Good.
I got one.
Okay.
Joe, what is the, like, I mean, I don't know who's going to be watching this video or whatnot. Let's just say a young person that wants to get into being a studio artist, right? What's one of the biggest pieces of advice that you could give them? Knowing that you're journey, I mean, you said it, you're the longest tenured artist within this building, so like, what's that piece of advice that you would offer someone?
Whoa. That's a big question.
One, there's a whole bunch of advice, but what's one thing to sort of get them inspired?
Just, spend your time doing what you love. I remember a conversation with my teacher, my college teacher, Bill Hague. He's still alive. I think he's in his late 90s now. But when he was teaching, I don't know exactly how old he was, but a bunch of us students that were really into making pottery and wanted to be potters. He said, why are you teaching? Why don't you just make pots? And I wasn't thinking at all at my age, that time, of why someone would want a teaching job. And he ended up retiring from teaching like a couple years later, so he could just make pots. And he still makes them.
And I think that's a theme that's running through this conversation is make what you love, and then find the audience for it later. That's sometimes young artists will come to the gallery maybe and they'll say, if I reject, I'll say, well, this isn't the right kind of thing, or this isn't what we're looking for. What can I make? And I think, I don't want an artist who's trying to make something exactly for a market. Like that's not what we do here. It needs to seem genuine. And then if we're not the right place and you love it, just go find the place that is that place. There's an audience for everybody's work.
You got to try it out, right? Too. You can maybe put your stuff in a place, and if it doesn't sell, then it's
and it is not reflective that your work isn't good or they're bad or anything like that. It's just finding the right fit. It's like.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if I had to say the one thing I learned from you that's always stuck with me is just roll with it. Like, roll with an idea.
Yeah.
Roll with whatever you're doing, try it. If it doesn't work, then just tweak it. And I think that kind of, you and Kevin are very free spirits. Like, you're the perfect two people to have. If there was ever an apocalypse, because you would just be like, yeah, that's what we got, we're rolling with it. If we gotta roll along over and eat grubs, we're gonna eat grubs. So.
I can eat grubs.
Yeah, but I know a lot of wild animals.
There you go.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's a great way to end the conversation. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. The show is up through, I can't remember the last day in February, but it's up for 3 or 4 more weeks. So for those watching this, come and see it. Maggie Aschak's work is also outstanding, and I love the two pieces together.
I love her pieces next to mine, because especially that sharp angular one next to a curvy one, like the opposites.
It's a great. All right, thanks for coming to the talk.